is Morgan, and I recently had my heart broken. So I did what any logical person would do.
What did you do?
I made a podcast about it.
Why?
Because no matter who you are or where you're from, when you get dumped, everybody's talking about it.
Are they, bitch?
Famously dumped. Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Famously Dumped, the show where we talk exclusively about getting dumped, about breakups not of our choosing. I'm your host, Morgan Miller, and as always, before every show, we go ahead and we check in with me and my emotions and how I am feeling. And today, you guys, I'm feeling nostalgic. Yeah, I am. I bought myself a keyboard and I taught myself the beginning of the Vanessa Carlton song. And for some reason, that's got me feeling very nostalgic, not only for my middle school days, but also for my ex-girlfriend, which is weird because we never really listened to that song. But I guess that song is what it pulls out of me. Don't know if you guys can relate on any level, but that's how I'm feeling today. And of course, also, I'm feeling really grateful because I have another guest that I'm so excited to have on, and we're gonna have a really fun time talking about getting dumped, which, like, who would know that we could have a fun time talking about it. You guys, I'm so excited about my guest. His name is Jared Freid. You should follow him on his Instagram at Jared Freid, and then he has an unbelievable podcast called the J Train Podcast that's like blowing up. It's pretty great, so check it out there. And yeah, I think, like, Brandon, let's start this gosh darn thing and bring Jared in.
Hello.
Hi, how are you, Jared?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being on this show. All right, well, cool. Well, let's get to it. We don't like to waste any time here. We want to get to talking about you getting fucking dumped. So to start, we don't use the real name of our exes here because we like to protect the anonymity. This isn't like an ex-bashing podcast. It's more like, how did we get through hell and back? So we're going to pick an alias for her. So Brandon, will you pull up the slide so we can pick an alias for Jared's ex? So these are the top 10 maybe names of 2019. And so let's pick a name for this mysterious Jew girl.
I mean, you gotta go Jewish, right? Based on Ava feels right, doesn't it?
Ava, let's do it. Ava's great.
That's right.
Great. So Ava is your ex's name throughout this podcast. Great. I call my ex Darcy, so that's if you ever want to mention her.
Darcy didn't make the list.
I know. Darcy I came up with on my own. It kind of just like felt right.
Ooh, so it's interesting because it's like, you know, I have not been dumped a lot. This is
Brag.
What's that?
Brag.
I guess it is. I have always considered myself like a 10-monther, you know,
Okay.
where it's like I would be 10 months in and I'd be like, is this the person I'm going to end up with or not? Or is this getting, you know, can I see the future in this? And I'd usually around 8 months be like, I don't know, this isn't for me. And then, so I was always like okay with the early exit, like exiting. I don't think I exited too early anything. I don't have like the one that got away, but like I definitely was the person that like was like, hey, I'm looking for different than this. It's not about you. And so this situation, I remember we never really dated. We were like hooking up and I was trying my best to make it more. And it just felt like it just was never materializing. So you feel like kind of like stupid. So you get to the point where you have to like dump yourself. You ever done that?
No, I've never dumped. I know the situation in which someone just like stops talking to you and you're like, I guess like I'm now have to text them we're not together, even though they've decided that. But no, I've only straight up dumped someone or been dumped.
I was in a position where I was on Birthright, and on Birthright, you know, where Jews go to Israel.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
So you get like kind of like you're in this like alternate reality. You're not. You're on a bus with 40 people. It feels like you're in the real world, but you're not. Like you're always eating together. You're around each other. And I remember I became like, I was into this this girl, this one woman, and like we're hitting it off. She's in the friend group, and and it's not like it wasn't like the normal dating structure where it's like you get time away, you send a text, you say, hey, let's go out for a date. So it was all so muddled, and I think like stuff like that became hard for me because like now you're like centered on it. You're like, if I don't, now this group of people on this one trip, if this doesn't work for me, you feel like all eyes are on you. So you're almost like grasping at it harder.
Yeah.
And you want it to happen because you're like, it's not even about the person. It's about, everyone's asking, like, did you guys hook up yet? It seems like you guys are hitting off. And like, also love is in the air on those trips. Did you do Birthright?
I am famously half Jewish, but I found that out 2 years ago from 23andMe. But I have never done Birthright, but I have heard that Birthright is like where love is supposed to like happen and like cultivate, and that's where you like find your Jewish like partner.
Sure. So like I never like on the flight to Israel, I remember having this feeling because I was all hopped up on drugs and alcohol because I'm not a really great flyer and it's also a long flight. I was like, wow, everyone on this flight looks like my cousin. So like you do,
and you want to date your cousin.
Don't we all? Like, why do most parents look like brother and sister? Because we're all narcissists.
Yeah. Everyone in my family's real hot. Yeah.
It's crazy. Now looking back, like it makes sense that people get married from Birthright. It makes sense that people get carried away.
Yeah.
It makes sense that like, I remember like now looking back, I'm like, yeah, this wasn't the right person for me. But like, I remember like feeling like you're in this enclosed area. And I think relationships can be a lot tougher that way. I think like.
So we're going to do a really quick section that we call, and I feel like you're going to get into this one, but we call this section Dump Stats.
Dump stats. Dump stats. Dump stats. These are the dump stats.
Great. And that is my voice. And I did that. So congratulations to me for now.
I'm a huge fan of intro songs sung by the host. I do them myself for my shows and I love them. So
yes. So this is your baseball card. Look at you, you just handsome Jewish devil.
That's right.
You look great. So we're going to just do quick stats. We're going to just name them off so that we can then really get into it. Just about you. So first off, like how many times have you been dumped?
It's really not many. I maybe probably 4 or 5 times.
4 or 5 times? That's a good amount. I think 4 to 5 times. Have you ever dumped someone is what I meant to say.
Oh yeah.
How many times?
15.
15? Yeah. Okay. And then for this one, how long ago did it happen? It was Birthright, so
long time ago. 15, 10 years ago. It's so funny we do the 10 years ago. So it's funny that we do these podcasts, or more than 10 years ago, maybe 11, 12 years ago. It's funny we do these podcasts, and it's like I do have this thought of like it makes it, when you go, let's do the podcast about getting dumped. It's funny to think that if they ever heard this, they're like, wow, this guy's really still doing this, like still thinking about this shit. And it's like, all right.
Well, we're going to get to if you're still thinking about it. So it's happened like 11 years ago, and you were how old on Birthright? You're what?
24.
24. Okay. All right. 24. And then how long were you guys together?
We weren't really together. Like this was like a month, like not.
Okay.
A big thing.
But like in terms of Birthright, it felt way more than a month. It was
because
like way
it was like
more.
you're every day. So it's like, you're like, you become, I think for me, like I became centered on it as like, it almost became like a game to win. So,
and now I'm going to ask you, like, how are you feeling emotionally about the breakup now, since it happened like 11 years ago?
Totally fine. I think it's interesting. I think like, it's interesting. I don't really, I feel very, I'm not the person who would use the word zen, but I do feel very zen about relationship stuff. Like I think every experience happened for a reason and happened for the best. There's things to learn from it. I definitely was, you have your ego blow in the moment, as, in a very male, very, again, animal way. But then at the same time, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't meant to be. And also, like, it's more like, I think with a breakup, you're like, I can't believe I went there. It's not even about the other person. You're like, oh my God, I got away from myself. I became this different version of myself. I think that's the hardest thing to get over. You're like, oh man, it's within me to act like a crazy person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then this is great. The last question I'm going to ask you is, when this dump happened, did you go full psycho?
No, I had a moment. Do you want me to tell the moment, or do you?
Well, we'll say no, you didn't go full psycho.
I had a version of full psycho that was, but it was like a personal moment. I'm like, kind of like in my own head. It wasn't like I didn't have a blow up. I kind of went back to, like, I just kind of went back to life, but like, it wasn't like I remember the moment I had, and I'm not a very like exploding person. I explode on camera. No, but I explode.
Or in the bedroom.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm pretty good. Or maybe this has happened over time. I'm pretty good about like calling the people that I love and trust to be like, am I crazy? What do you think of this situation? Like high voice, asking question about myself. Like, so this was not very me.
Yeah. Okay. So just to we'll just recap really quickly. You have been dumped 4 to 5 times. You've dumped like 15 girls. That a boy. This happened 11 years ago. You were 24 years old. You were together like a month, but in terms of birthright, that is probably, if we're doing like dog years type stuff, that's probably 6 years.
That's 6 Jewish years.
6 Jewish years. Okay. And then you feel really zen about this which is very great. I love the word zen for you because your podcast is so, the way you speak into a microphone, I'm like, this guy, he's on it. He's like, bachelor, let's talk bachelor.
That's right.
So you're zen about it. And then you didn't go full psycho. So that's your dump stats. And then we're just going to get into it, which we kind of already have, is like how was it in general? And then you got dumped and then what happened? I kind of want to know. Let's get into that.
So we went on this birthright thing. And then the other thing about birthright is that you can't it's tough to get physical. So we're in this constant state of hanging out all day, but it's also we're hanging out amongst other people we're hanging out with. So who's to say what if I'm delusional and having these feelings for someone that aren't necessarily there. And then I remember we ended up having sex and it went very badly from my end.
Wait, on birthright.
And it was like
on your end?
Legitimately, not even a one pump chump. Legitimately, literally, you, and I came, she blew on my penis, and I came so quickly. And I remember I was so fucking pissed. Because I'm built this up, and I'm like, fuck, this is my chance to show this person. You know what I mean? Okay, all else, I got this one thing in the bag. I got this one arrow to knock her out with. And listen, I'm not saying I'm a sexual champ. I'm pretty average, I'm sure. But to be average, you have to have below average nights and above average nights.
Right.
So I know what it's like to kill it, just on stage and in the set. This was literally, if this is my penis, it was literally came. Not even
I guess women are lucky in the sense of that's great because it's time for round 2, and you guys are
no, I need to go in the back and whittle a penis to fucking. Also, we're away,
Sorry, a mess.
It's a bad look. I've come quick before. One time I came so quick that my girlfriend just walked in as I'm going. One time I came so quick. One time I came so quick that what are you, Scrooge McDuck? She just came in a whole like pajamas with a hat. So. Shh. So
you're gonna get dumped, dude, on this show.
I'll be on the second. That'll be my second episode of Famously Dumped. Now I'm in this position where someone I'm trying so hard with, I've now fucked up with the bed, and I'm like, I can't even be funnier than this moment. Like, this was so bad.
Oh yeah.
And that was kind of like the end of the trip. And now I'm flying back, like, fucking. When you fly to Israel, a bunch of Orthodox Jews will like run to the back of the flight to pray as the flight's taking off. We were coming back from Israel. I went and prayed with them for my sake. Like I was like, oh no. They're like, what? You in? I'm like, I gotta save a marriage. I'm praying with them. Like, please, I came quickly. Baruch atah. Let my penis be okay. Like it was legitimately like the whole flight just freaking out. Like, oh God. But I remember like I was trying to give it a shot after this. And I remember, when you ask someone on a date and they're like, well, maybe. We didn't go on a date. And then I remember it was like, meet me at this bar. And I went to meet her at this bar. And I remember there was like, we're talking, but she's not really giving me attention. She starts talking to another guy. And I'm like, and I kind of had this moment of like, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Like I thought, and I do understand this happens to a lot of people. This isn't just me, but like, you're like, oh, now we're going to see what this is. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't the same. And I kind of had to, and I remember having this like explosion moment of like, what's going on here? I'm trying to see you right now.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, it wasn't like receipt. That wasn't kind of reciprocated. That was like, well, I mean, it was kind of like putting away where you're like, oh, the lights just come on. You're like, I'm not in my own bedroom. I kind of felt crazy because I was like, oh, it doesn't seem like you're going to try in the way that I'm trying right now. And I remember leaving the bar, like just walking out. I was like, okay, close credit card. And like, that was kind of like my psycho moment where you're like, and you're like mad about how this whole thing went down. And then I got home and I remember like, that was like it. Like, that was like, I had to like, it is kind of with a lot of relationships, you can have the illusion. And then there's a point where someone has to go, what's really going on here? And I think I was the one to do that. And just to find out it really wasn't happening.
Yeah. So that was it. But then you had a big realization that that's a thing that could happen. And like, were you sad? Were you like fucked up, or was it just that night and you were like, well, I learned something?
I think it was like, it kind of felt like I was like Lenny in Of Mice and Men. Like I squeezed the thing too hard, like I was like, man, I really had.
It's a toxic analogy.
I know it's toxic, but like, you kind of do that to the relationships. You're like, I can see in my head, you have to match what your partner sees for it too. Like you kind of have to match that thing. There's always these negotiation moments in relationships where you find out what the other person's willing to budge on. Mm-hmm. And those are real talks. And like mine just happened at a bar in front of another guy that she was talking to. And
it wasn't really a talk. It was like a visual.
Yeah, I'm having
you had like a visual breakup.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh shit, like it was the lights turning off. Like it was like, oh shit, I'm negotiating with myself. Mm-hmm. And while you're getting drinks with someone else literally right in front of me. So I'm going to back away. Yeah. I'm going to freak out and talk to myself on the way home and walk, because it was like blocks from my apartment at the time. And I like remember having like a talk with myself, and really it was like the realization of just like the squeezing to like, I'm like, why do I care so much? Like, and I think like it helped that this is happening in New York City. I'm like, oh, the world just became bigger. Man, I'm a loser. I lost in this. And I think that's like also like, that's when you see like, I get a lot of, from my podcast, I get all these emails from women. And, I've seen the email where the girl will be like, why does this guy keep DMing me? And it'll be like, hey, 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 hey. And then the last one's like, fuck you, bitch. And you're like, yeah, he's crying, like the lights turned on for him, like, so I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So what's your overall advice if like someone had a similar situation? Like, what's your advice to someone who gets broken up with like this, I guess, visually broken up with? What was your advice to like handle it?
Whoa, hold on 1 second. Hi, before we get to the overall advice, my name's Morgan Miller. You've just been watching me this whole time. I'm the host of Famously Dumped, and I've got a couple of things I got to tell you before we finish up the episode. One, we have an email account, famouslydumped@gmail.com, where you can email me. Maybe you have comments, questions for our guests, questions for me. Maybe you have advice for our listeners, or maybe you have a story about getting dumped that you want to tell me about. So please email me there. I'd love to hear from you, and we'll put it on the podcast. 2, you can donate to the show, which is great. How can you donate? At our Venmo, which is famously_dumped, or you can go on over to my Patreon account, which is patreon.com/MorganMiller1717. Over on my Patreon will live bonus episodes, uncut episodes, and other comedy material that I'm coming out with that will strictly be on Patreon, okay? So head on over there. And finally, don't forget to follow me on social media. Yes, I'm doing a social media plug. Come on, it's 2021. Let's get to it. My social media is Morgan Miller 17 across the board. And also, I'm on TikTok. Yes, I'm in my 30s. I have TikTok. I kind of blew up over there. So go check me out. That's Morgan Miller Talks, TOKS. And that's about it. You guys, let's get back to the episode. Enough for me. Bring us on back.
I think it's okay to let someone know where you are. I think it's okay to, like, listen, I don't know if it would have happened any differently. Like, if I went back now, like, I don't know if I could redo. If I could redo it, I would have done it differently. But I don't think I would have. I was, younger. I think this takes time. Like, I think it's okay to like get carried away with stuff. Like, I think that will happen. I think the realization is that like, if you get carried away in a situation where you feel like you're putting in more than the other person and trying for something, and you're like, it kind of feels, you ever been in those dreams where you're trying to grab at the door and your fingers don't work? That's kind of this version of I think knowing that this happens to a lot of people. And I think also like what's always helped me with relationships is like telling the story to friends and being like, what do you think?
Yeah.
And not for them to like tell you what to do, but to just go, I think always constantly asking, am I crazy? And knowing who the right people to go to with those stories are and who not to. But yeah, I think accepting it is also another thing. Like, I think reading between the lines is hard when you're in it. And then the minute you see it, you go, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like that happened fast for you. But I had that moment, and it was like, it took me like 4 months, but then I had the moment where it's like my therapist kept being like, you were talking about dumping her. Like, you were talking about this. And I'm like, no, that's not what's happening. And then it clicked, and it was like, oh yeah, I did. She was reading between the lines faster than I was. And now I can see like what, all the stuff that was wrong. And we were in couples therapy, and it was like, yeah, it just was a slow like burn, which I think I needed to like, I needed to get like punched in the face to like figure that out. But I think that's great advice. Like, accept it and read between the lines.
Something that you actually just said that made me think of it's like it's like relationships aren't meant to be one. Mm-hmm. You and the person should be having fun.
Yeah.
The luxury we have that we talked about earlier that I mentioned and we talked about is that we don't have to get married. No one's forcing you into anything. So if you're not having a good time and you're just trying to like win this person to try and like prove something to yourself, it's not going to make you happier. Like, just like your therapist said, like, you were talking about ending it. So, like, you weren't necessarily happy yourself, but are you trying to, like, gain back the money you lost in the stock? Like, trying to win. Anytime you try to win a relationship, you're going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like only hindsight 2020 that I think I was doing that is like, yeah, I was, and as to like say how fucked up your analogy was, like, yeah, I was doing that. I was like squeezing it so tight. And then I think it was squeezed so tight that she was like, it's too much. We're trying, it's like, I can't breathe. And I was like, but I'm helping you breathe. And it's like, it wasn't that kind of thing.
And that's not fun for them. So it's like, now both of you are not having fun. You're not having fun squeezing. They're not having fun getting squozen.
Right. Squozen. Yeah. Squozen. It's the prequel to Frozen too.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. Well, you know what? That's great. Thank you for your advice. We do like 2 ending segments so I can get you out of here, but thank you. Like, it's great to hear how it went down and what a cool story, and very Jewish, which we haven't had yet.
Very Jewy. Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure. I feel
so. Before we go, we have 2 segments
rising out of me like in Ghost when that guy died.
We have 2 segments. One is called And Now Time for Horoscopes. Great. So this is called Horoscopes. So this is where we see if you and Ava were meant to be ever by knowing your horoscope. So what is your sign?
I'm a Pisces.
You're a Pisces. Oh, okay, my father's a Pisces. And I'm a Pisces rising. It's a very good sign. You're emotional, but under the surface. Do you remember do you know what her sign was?
No idea.
No idea?
Legitimately no idea.
Any idea what month she was born in?
No.
You know what? It doesn't, I believe in astrology more than anyone in the world. It feels like maybe that's not your bag. And maybe this is never supposed to be.
Are you a big astrology person?
I'm a big astrology person. Yeah. Big time. Our final segment. Brandon, bring it up. This is it. We're about to... Yes, honey. Yes. Great. 3 compliments for Morgan. This is so I don't feel so shitty about myself right now. So this is where you give me 3 compliments before you leave.
Oh, yeah. This is a comedian's podcast. You're very funny. You're very good on podcasts. Very good to go back and forth with. You were amazing on my show. And you're a fun person to see randomly. I would say that. When I see you out randomly, it's always a nice conversation and very easy. And you can tell why you're a great improviser, because people who are good in conversation are usually good improvisers. And that's what
those are great. Those are fantastic. You did good. I don't put you on the spot. You did great. You did great. So that's it. So before we leave, where can we find you on social media? And you're working on anything that everyone can check out?
At Jared Freid on Instagram, the J Train podcast. There's just too much of it. I do Monday through Friday now because of the quarantine. But I'm putting videos on my Instagram every day. So the videos are like snippets from the podcast, and those are all fun. And, I yell at The Bachelor too. So when The Bachelor comes back, I yell at it on my Instagram story.
All right, Jared, you were great. Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for being on the show. You're so wonderful. I hope we run into each other soon. Have good conversation then.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, Jared. I'll see you soon. Bye, buddy. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really fun episode. Jared's just a dream. He's so great. And that's it. All right, Brandon, take us out with a song of your choice, as always.
Morgan, I told you this a million times. We don't have the rights to any music.
Famously dumped.